Electronic Arts have a terrible reputation amongst gamers, with headlines recently being atrocious. Between Anthem's botched launch and the surprise mechanics fiasco, they clearly do deserve it. Less considered though is the other things that they are doing, like EA Originals, which provides really a quite absurdly good deal for indie developers. One that, while at the face of it is incredibly generous, does actually tell us a lot about where EA thinks the future of gaming business models will be, and the moves that they are making to prepare for that. So today there's actually quite a lot to get into. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another report. This time we are talking about EA, and not really in the way that we usually do. So, GameIndustry.biz interviewed EA's EVP of Strategic Growth, Matt Billbey, about their strategy and reputation, and he gave some interesting insights into what the future of games could actually look like. So, Billbey's first quote is, 25 years at EA and I still struggle with the external perception that we're just a bunch of bad guys. He says that they love making and playing games, but when they make a mistake, it's on a huge scale and everyone hears about it. Well, it is true, it is a large scale, and yeah, people do hear about it, so he's not really that wrong. Their reputation is absolutely shot right now, and for pretty good reason. It's hard to remember the last big thing EA have done successfully, except for maybe Apex Legends release, but even then, most people seem to have attributed that to EA staying out of Respawn's hair instead of assigning credit for it to EA, with it even being suggested that Zampella's role on the EA board has essentially allowed him to shield Respawn from the bad stuff. Though the last bit is just speculation. Now, this isn't even just for the case of consumers. According to Christopher Dring, who actually penned the article, EA have almost never won at the MCV Awards, it's an industry trade mag, when he worked there. EA were always treated as a villain, rarely voted for, and often booed. Now, of course, not every wing of the company is at fault, though, and it's easy to see corporations as just a single entity and to assign blame uniformly. While some of EA's management are just seemingly making poor decisions across the board, some of the company are still seemingly doing good work, with the prime example being their Originals publishing label, known best for A Way Out, Fae, I think it's Fee, and Sea of Solitude. It's also responsible for everyone's favourite moment at E3 2015 when the Unravel developer took the stage, shaking with nerves. Around this year's E3, they also revealed that Hazelight, Glowmade, and Zonk have all signed originals for new games. Now, given EA's troubled history with absorbing studios into its fold, you might be wondering why anyone would get in bed with them. Well, the developers that publish through Originals actually get every cent of profit once EA have covered their own costs. And that's honestly quite crazy. That's not normal at all for the industry, and I'm sure most indie developers would be pretty happy to jump on board with a deal like that as compared to what other publishers can offer. Also, publishers do a significant amount of work that most people aren't aware of, especially when it comes to the indie realm, and they can't all offer the same level of support that, say, EA Originals can give. So what's the catch here? Because surely it's EA. There has to be a catch. Well, there kind of is. They're doing this because they want to. As a part of their strategy, Billbey says that they want to connect with new and more creative talent and use their experience to help them, basically to foster a good relationship. That serves many of their own goals as an organization as they get to teach up-and-coming talent in the industry and build good relationships. Now, there is that, but also there's Origin Access, and that has been giving them a lot more insight into player behavior. So Billbey says gamers will play a FIFA or a Fortnite, they will have one main franchise, but then they want breaks from those games to play something that's maybe 5 or 10 hours long. If more EA Originals are available as access subs, it makes Origin Access a more attractive prospect, and if those games are better after EA's involvement, then I suppose it is a win-win for both the developer and for EA, even if EA don't directly profit off the game itself and its sales on other platforms. Now, it might not be massively profitable, but basically it seems to serve EA's goals with Access. In fact, Billbey talked up a lot the creative council that's been set up at EA that is being ran by Vince Zampella, of course, of Respawn Entertainment. He said that the council are going to reach reach out to smaller studios and perhaps mentor them. Basically a crack team of people with business and creative experience that can build relationships with teams and work on cool things with them. Again, that's all good for soft influence, soft power around the industry, though it also seems like, yeah, there could be aging veterans at EA who want to help to influence and improve the next generation at this pretty crucial point in the industry's young life. Now, of course, broadly speaking, this all is with the goal of serving EA. That is what we would expect from a company, so yeah, I mean, it's worth still bearing that in mind. Now, Billbey goes on to say that they want to expand their operations here, but aren't entirely sure how much they can handle, and that they don't want to overpromise to their indies and miss the mark. He mentions 100 games as an example, but only hypothetically, saying that it's clearly too much. He said that they do not want their name to be dragged through the mud, and he brought up EA Partners, which was a more traditional third-party publishing wing of EA from years ago. EA Partners was reasonably successful in the late 90s and early 2000s, but a change in leadership and direction caused them to, caused a lot of scorn from various high-profile studios, including Oddworld Inhabitants. Apparently, if EA did not own the IP, they basically didn't really care about pushing your game very hard, and that mindset burned a lot of bridges. Billbey said that they want to restore the reputation that was damaged back then, that they used to be a just finish the game on time kind of group, and now they want to be a how can we work together to bring your creative idea to the market in the right way kind of group. Now that does sound good, and that difference would be night and day, and it does more closely match what the more popular indie publishers are doing today, which is something that has been seen as a large positive from both developers and consumers, but it is of course seemingly at odds with their own first-party titles, things like the BioWare situations with Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem, both games where their launch versions were developed in shockingly short timeframes, especially for Anthem, which badly needed more development time but was shot out anyway. But hey, quarterly earnings, right? So it is strange when you see basically conflicting points of view from within the same organization. So, I think he's justified in this much better approach, but how does it fit into EA's strategy? Well, EA do believe that streaming and subscription models are going to be pretty big. The gaming is going to grow as a market, and that's going to be to new audiences and even new geographies. I imagine they're talking about, say, parts of the world that can't afford console or gaming PCs. Brazil's always been a prime example here. Back when the PS4 launched, it cost 4,000 real in Brazil, which came out to be about $1,800 US back then, and that of course largely was down to insane taxes. Now things like this Brazil situation are likely the case across the globe, so I suspect poorer countries will be quite heavily targeted as emerging growing markets in the next 20 to 50 years as audience members really start to benefit from games and hardware being separate, as well as lower buy-ins with subscriptions. Now let's just gloss over how some of those countries may not have the internet infrastructure right now for the streaming to even work. Of course these are new markets though that will want games, and it's going to be an arms race for the highest value subscription service. They believe that people will consume games more like they do other media, and that as an industry we'll need more games to keep up with demand. We'll need big games and small games of all different types, drawing comparisons to Netflix's style, which pretty much looks like make quality content of every type for every viewer. Now Billbey does address the Netflix comparison, saying that at the EA Originals group they actually had that name before Netflix were doing the same thing. They didn't just copy them, but it is a similar idea. They want to enable creativity in the industry because it's clear that that's what both consumers and developers want. It's very hard to disagree with that fundamentally, but I think it is a bit of an optimistic view of the future, one that doesn't really match up with all of what EA are doing across the board, but I suppose that's a point to address for later. Now, the next topic is how daunting this new future is for those in the industry, and according to Billbey, the EA Originals developers want to be part of Access so they can learn how the subscription model works. He continues saying that the value proposition of subscriptions today is great, and that streaming will unlock value for everyone, not just hardware owners, and that it's vital that the industry is ready for that change. When they work with others in Access, they share all of the metrics so that they can all figure out what basically will just allow them to provide better value for players. And he then goes on to compare Access's future to what Netflix offers for a family, basically an insane amount of value and variety. In his own words, we need depth and breadth to satisfy the whole household, and that's what EA Originals is for them. He goes on to explain that smaller developers reach out to them because they're nervous about how to handle this change, and EA are helping them out with access. Together, they've noticed one thing supposedly: adding games to access is additive to their business and does not cannibalize sales, which I think is quite interesting. It seems that subscription models aren't really hurting games purchases, but are instead opening up a new segment of the audience that otherwise wouldn't have purchased it, and that's why Origin Access has over 200 games, because it seems to be working out well for their partners. Now that's all well and good, but to put my own personal opinion in here, I am very worried about what subscription models will do for consumer value perceptions. Now, just look at mobile. That's where a fantastic quality premium game that's well designed with no BS will almost always do terribly, because it's expected that things are free in the platform, and that forces a lot of pretty bad business models. Now, once the subscriptions become the norm, well, I wonder, will those who control the subscription services essentially become the gatekeepers of the gaming industry, rendering all other content kinda niche? Which is a big worry to me. Now, the interview ends with Billbey talking about just the future a little bit more, including discussing how the availability of better metrics for developers and platform holders means that they're in deeper conversations, and that access to player behavior data means that developers can create better games that players want. He briefly discusses streaming tech and how they are invested in that space so they could better understand how to develop for it, because they know that the quality of the streaming experience is important, and that if they don't get the intimate details right, they cannot make really good games for those services. Now, there is one big thing that I want to talk about here. This interview is from an EA executive, and that's kind of interesting, because this is the same company that's nickel and dimed players for years, that's released buggy and incomplete games. They're partially responsible for introducing essentially the gambling epidemic to modern video games. They're the very same company who is responsible for the death or disgrace of many beloved franchises and studios. So how can you take really this stuff at face value, this positive sounding stuff? Well, I think here's the thing. EA is not a singular entity. They're comprised of many different wings and many different groups. In the same capacity that it's unfair to blame developers for what maybe a studio head or publisher has decreed they have to do, there are many people in EA who might genuinely be trying to make brilliant games and help others do the same. They're just seemingly a distinct part of the business to the part that mismanaged Anthem, or the part that continues to look at FIFA Ultimate Team revenue and have a massive laugh. And while I'll always advocate for looking at the industry for what it really is and not getting hooked on cheap promises delivered with a silver tongue, there are genuine examples of seeing the trees for the forest, and when that is vital. If there's a part of EA that is happy to pay for a creative council to make better games across the industry, or are okay with breaking into publishing interesting and niche games without a massive profit margin directly in the game, yeah, we ought to give them some credit for that, even if it is ultimately self-serving. Ultimately, that's a market creating, growth. We should, though, just as much absolutely refuse to support the anti-consumer and predatory practices that, say, EA are all too well known and genuinely quite hated for. I don't think this stuff's going to change anytime soon for them, but there should be more nuance than just EA is bad, because that actually sometimes can lock off the more deep delve into how they're actually being quite bad, or in a case like this, how there are little bits of silver lining, locked away in a cupboard in one tiny segment of their business. But then for me, all the same, as much as these subscriptions might be touting value, I'm just really worried about the long-term impacts they'll have in the industry. I need to do more research on it. I want to see how free-to-play has impacted mobile. I want to see how Netflix and Amazon Prime have impacted consumer value perceptions of television and film, and how that's changed those industries, because I'm really worried that things might not go that well for games. But anyway, let me know what you think about the varying aspects of EA. Have you played any EA original titles, and are you an Origin Access subscriber? Do you think it's a good value? Do you like having that catalog of more unique niche games on there? Please let me know in the description down below. And with that, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.